The enemy tries to intimidate us a lot in our life and other people, but in those moments when we just keep our eyes on Jesus and have those intimate moments of him when we remember his love, that is really going to be what overcomes fear in our life.
Welcome back to the podcast. We are so excited to be joining you for this episode in our Spring Cleaning of the Soul series. Today we're getting into that episode that everyone has probably been interested in, and that is our emotions. Spring cleaning our emotions.
Yeah. And I think with emotions, it can be kind of intimidating because I know that there was a time in my life where I felt like any negative emotion I had just right from the start, it was like, oh no, this fear is wrong, this anxiety is wrong. But one thing I kind of just wanted to talk about real quick before we went into some emotions that we deal with is that emotions, like just having those initial negative emotions sometimes aren't always wrong. I think the trouble comes in when we allow those emotions to control us and to make decisions in our life for us, because I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit, but our thoughts, of course, can lead to our emotions. But what I've noticed in my life too is that there's other things that can lead to emotions for me, and it could be an environment that we're in that, is just very stimulating or something, or even stuff going on in our bodies, like our hormones or blood sugar, whatever it is, not being hungry, hangry. Exactly. So kind of just having that thought in mind, knowing that, emotions by themselves aren't necessarily always wrong, but it's just how much authority do they have in our life?
If you want to hand over the responsibility of your emotions to someone else, then you will always be a slave to other people, because you're handing the reins of your life over to them and going, hey, do whatever you want. I want to go that way, but you're in control, so I'll just react to whatever you say. And then we wonder why we always feel like we're being pulled to and fro by everyone else's opinion of us. It's because we're giving them that kind of power in our life. The only way we're going to find freedom in our emotions is to take back the reins and not give anyone else the authority. It doesn't mean people aren't going to say things and do things that might hurt us or have the ability to cause emotions in us, but we can choose whether or not we accept those or we dwell on those. And so this is the part of our soul that I feel like really determines the course of our life. And like you said, it starts in our thoughts. So I definitely recommend that you go back and watch that episode on our thoughts and our mind. And then even the one from last week on our will, because those things are going to also determine the emotions that we feel. But one emotion that I realized I was dealing with, and I didn't realize it at first because I'm not this kind of a person, but I realized that I was dealing with these feelings of a lot of self-negativity of, why try? Why bother? I can't do this, and I was feeling so defeated and so down. I'm talking constantly, to the point where Jeff finally kind of said, he would try to do it lovingly at first, in the office when it's hey, Tuna, be nice to my friend Jim, right? He would literally say that to me and trying to be lighthearted about it. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm so hard on myself. But then finally he was like, you're so negative on yourself. And I'm like, man, I never thought that would have been said about me, because I've never been that kind of a person. I mean, I've never been super into myself, but I've never been someone who's just so harsh on myself. And I realized, wow, this is something I've let creep in. It didn't happen overnight, right? It crept in, and I realized I had to think about, what thoughts am I actually thinking about myself? That's causing these emotions of just self-defeat and why bother, and looking at the glass half empty all the time. And I think something just on a practical level, of course, we know from that first episode, we need to replace those thoughts. We need to take them captive. But some practical things to kind of help, because once a thought becomes an emotion, it's just not going to change, right? It's going to take time for those thoughts to be replaced and for you to develop new patterns of thinking, like we talked about.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, what do you do? Because those emotions are real. I started doing things that I enjoy in multiple areas of my life. So when I'm being really difficult on myself or harsh on myself, I'll do a workout that I enjoy, or I'll clean the kitchen, or I'll read a book that I really enjoy. I love reading. That's something that relaxes me. Or I listen to a podcast that's really encouraging, or something to take my mind off of that negativity, because I know that negativity is just being stemmed from these thoughts. Yeah. So while I'm in the process of changing my thought patterns about myself, I'm not going to give myself the room to just wallow in it. I'm going to do something to help myself, like work out or read or clean, or, something that you enjoy and is kind of productive. And you'll be amazed at how much that just can kind of instantly shift your mood and your attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've noticed at work for myself, if there's times when I'm like just, I'm starting to feel a little anxious and there's really no reason for it, I'm just sitting at my desk working, I'll just get up and like go get something to drink, like just move. And that's kind of like what I was saying earlier. Sometimes our emotions are honestly just caused by like physical things going on. Like we just have energy and we kind of just need to move, like you said.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes the enemy just wants to just keep you in this small little place. No, this is how you are. He. And it's like, no, just realize that you're in control. He's not. Do something. Clean the kitchen. Listen to a podcast. I love reading my book on my Kindle. Take a hot bath and read, right?
That's a big deal. That's a big one.
And you'll just be amazed at how much better you feel. And then in the meantime, listen to the episode on our thoughts and change the way you think about yourself.
Maybe while you're in the tub.
Maybe while you're in the tub, you turn us on and let us talk to you about your thoughts. And that will change. But I think it's important, like you nip thoughts in the butt by changing your thoughts and realizing where these are coming from. But I think you nip emotions in the butt by just literally changing what you're doing and just not giving it attention. It's kind of like a child throwing a temper tantrum, right? It's like they want attention, and your emotions are kind of like that. And so you just got to kind of like not give it the attention it wants, and those emotions will fade because they have nothing to feed off anymore.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about emotions as like a fire. And so when you said that, it ties right into that, because like with emotions, when they're in the place they're supposed to be in our life, not leading us, it's like a fire that's in a fire pit or in a fireplace, and it's beautiful,
and it's wonderful and cozy,
and it's fueling the fire in our life. But if it's allowed to take control, and that's like a forest fire, right? Yeah. So just like putting emotions in their place.
That's good.
But an area for me, one emotion that I struggle with is the emotion of fear. And I have come to realize over and over again, and I have to remind myself of this constantly, but the antidote to fear, at least for me, has been the love of God. And I used to think that the opposite of fear would be faith. And I think, of course, to a certain extent, that is true, right? Like we need to have faith that these things that we're afraid of are not going to happen. But I've been so many times stuck in this rhythm of being like, I will not fear, right? And just thinking like, oh, I'm building my faith. And then I'll have a moment with God like this where I'm reminded of God's love in my life. And that is what's really like switched my thought process from one place to another. And I was reading a story the other day. I really like these, like they're fantasy stories, and they usually like involve love and like olden days, like, I don't know, 1800s or whatever, fantasy. But I wanted to mention this story real quick because it was like another revelation for me. And in this story, this girl had been abused by her stepsister and her brother, I believe. And so she ran off, like she was running away from them because I think they were trying to put her in a convent or something to keep her from like ever being able to really find love. And she goes to this castle, and when she's there, she realizes that this man who she had fell in love with years ago was there, and she had been trying to find this man forever. Wow. And her stepsister finally finds her in this castle, and her stepsister had also loved this man and was kind of jealous of her. And so she's threatening her, like, if you try to marry this man, I'm literally like going to poison him. Like, I'm going to kill him. And so she's terrified, right? Like, she's like, if I do what I feel like my heart is telling me to do, I'm going to be terrified. Or she's like going to, kill somebody. And there's this moment in the story after days of her stepsister like intimidating her and, hissing these things at her, like, I'm going to kill him if you do anything. She like has this moment with him, with this person that she loves. And in that moment, she said that everything stopped. Like she, for the first time in days, wasn't even paying attention to her stepsister who was like glaring her down and trying to intimidate her. She was just focused on him. And it just reminded me so much of Jesus. And like, the enemy tries to intimidate us a lot in our life and other people. But in those moments when we just keep our eyes on Jesus and have those intimate moments of him when we remember his love, that is really going to be what overcomes fear in our life.
That's so good. Perfect love casts out fear.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. The opposite of fear being love and not faith. And
yeah, exactly.
because it's all him. If the opposite of fear was faith, then it would be about how much faith we have and how strong we are and what we can do to battle our fear. But it's like the battle is the Lord's, right? Like it's him that causes us to have the victory. And so leaning on that, I think is just so beautiful. Okay, so another attitude that I've kind of actually noticed in myself recently that I've been dealing with that I think can really hinder us from kind of progressing in what God wants for us to do is the emotion. I don't know if this is necessarily an emotion, but being really stressed out, right? That's the only way I know how to explain it. And I think we can relate, right? Like it's something that I think, especially in our world today, it's so stressful. Everything is so fast paced. We're surrounded by people who make it seem like we're falling behind. And there's just this feeling that like I've noticed of I'm so behind, there's too much to do. And I almost kind of like what you were saying before, like I almost start to feel a panic like rising up inside me. And I just think like anytime I try to stop and rest and do something purely just to enjoy myself, like read a book or play a video game or I don't know, something that isn't productive, right? I almost feel so guilty. Like, oh man, I have so much to do. And then I go to bed at night and I almost start to panic and I think, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And I think what happened is we were in a really busy season around fall of last year, like late fall, Thanksgiving and early Christmas time. We had a really big project for work and it's something that kind of happens annually, but it was just really overwhelming, working nights and weekends, just kind of cramming for this one project. And it wasn't actually too bad because we were prepared for it. We knew this is what it was going to be. It's kind of fun working in your jammies and just kind of like getting stuff done, right? And so that in itself was not that bad. It was crazy, but it was okay. We knew it was a short season and then afterwards it was Christmas. And so it was wonderful. But I noticed that like maybe after Christmas and the New Year, and then you're kind of getting back into that routine with work and everything. I noticed that sense of like, I got to get this done didn't leave. Like I was still in like, I had almost like trained myself to think that there's constantly something that I'm falling behind in, because with that project, it was kind of like almost like I constantly need to be working on it. I only stopped to basically like rest and then go back to it. And so I realized I had been training my heart and training my mind and training my emotions to feel this way. And now, even though when I would actually think about the stuff I have to do, there would be times when I had more to do and times when I had less to do. But like when you actually thought about it, it was like, why would I panic about this? This is a normal workload for me. This shouldn't make me feel this way. And yet it was so real. And so I feel like in that moment, first of all, I recognized that this was a habit that I was creating in myself. I think a lot of times we dismiss our emotions and we think, oh, I just need to ignore it. And we don't realize, just like thoughts, sometimes they're thoughts and sometimes there are strongholds that we need to get rid of. And I think it's the same in our emotions. There are emotions that we're like, okay, I need to just ignore that and not give that the attention it needs. And other times we need to realize this is a pattern. This is almost like an emotional habit that I've created in my life. And if I don't deal with it, it's just going to keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. And so with this particular one, I feel like something that really helped me, if this is something that you're dealing with, is is to make a list. What I would do, I like making lists. And so like in my phone, I have an app, like a notes app, and I have like a list of like tasks, and I like, what do I need to get done each day? And then I have what do I want to get done by the end of the week, so that I can kind of break it down. And these are like big picture things. It's not like every little email I need to send or every, that's too stressful. But it's just, what do I need to accomplish by the end of the week? And then I look at my week each day and I go, what do I want to make sure that I get done each day? Right? And I do that because then what that does is it frees me up to then reject the stress I feel that I'm not getting enough done. Because if I don't make that list, I might not know if I'm actually getting my work done, right? Like, it is important to get your work done. And sometimes if you get behind, maybe you procrastinated, or maybe you said yes to too many things, and maybe there is a lot on your plate, mapping it out and going, okay, what am I going to make sure I get done this day, this day, this day, by the end of the week, whatever. Okay, I've got a plan. I'm good. I will get this done. Now, when you are trying to relax, or you're going to bed at night, or you're trying to cook dinner, times when you don't need to be working, and you feel the emotions of that stress and that panic starting to rise up, now you can say, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to let myself think that way anymore and feel that way anymore. We've made a list. I've done everything on it for today, or I'm going to take care of that tomorrow. It's on my list and I don't need to worry about it. And that's why I think having a list is important, because it is important that we take care of our stuff. But a lot of times this isn't about doing the stuff, right? It's usually about the habits that we've created in our heart. And so I think for me, that's really been helping, of just making those lists.
Yeah.
And then now I feel like I have the release to go, whenever I feel that stress, just go, nope, I'm not going there. And then intentionally scheduling in time to rest, because I was not giving myself rest back then, because I didn't feel like I had time. And so it almost taught me that, like, oh, rest equals bad, right? Like, that's not good, because I should be doing something else. And so I had to almost retrain myself to realize that, no, when I give myself rest and I do things I enjoy, like reading, or, taking a bath, or, like these things that give me joy, when I schedule them into my day, they're actually good things. And I had to almost teach myself how to enjoy those again.
Yeah. And that's why that verse about, God saying, like, don't worry about the trials of tomorrow, because today is enough for today. I've actually been having to remind myself of that verse recently, because it's easy to just, start putting all of your things that you have to do and just thinking about like miles and and months away from you. And that's why God wants us to put those limits on our days and on our life, so that we realize that the stuff that's supposed to be done in, days from now, we're not supposed to be worrying about that stuff,
Yeah. You don't have the grace to do it
Yeah,
yet.
it's true.
All right, question time.
Bring it here.
All right, so emotions, right? So let's not get emotional about this, Felicia. But how can you harness your emotions without becoming a fake person with others? Because like we're taught to like harness our emotions. We're not supposed to give in to them, and just, we need to not give them the attention they deserve. But how do we balance that with what a lot of Christians call, like, when you're just around people and you're like, how are you? And they're like, oh, I'm great. How are you? It's like, you can tell they're not being real. It's like, what's the balance of controlling your emotions, but not just coming across like this ultra fake person?
For sure. So I actually kind of, and it's no one's fault because I do it too, but I do kind of get bothered and a little bit worn down by at work when you're like, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. How are you? Good. How are you?
It
Good.
means nothing. It means nothing.
It absolutely means nothing. Yeah. And so on days where I'm struggling a little bit and people are like, hey, how are you? I'm like, I'm doing okay, And I've started to do that more, not because I want to just be like, oh, I'm defeated in life, and like, but it's like everybody is struggling sometimes with certain things in their life. And I think that just pretending that everything's okay all the time, honestly, it just doesn't, like, I don't think you get to healing that way. I don't think ignoring, like you said earlier, like ignoring issues that you're having is really going to bring you to that healing that you're looking for. And it's the community with other people and like, realizing that other people are going through things that actually, can start to get us out of those holes. And like, I also kind of think about God and realizing that God is an emotional God, like maybe his emotions aren't exactly like ours in the same exact way, but like, God it talks about God having grief. It talks about God weeping, when Lazarus died and like before the cross, like what he was going through and the anxiety that caused him. And so just realizing that like emotions in general, like aren't bad from the start. And we talked about this in the episode of just, not letting them control you. But yeah, I guess just realizing that negative emotions aren't always bad. It's like God didn't create us to be those robots or something like that.
Yeah, definitely not. No.
Yeah. Okay, you ready for your question?
I guess so.
There are emotions that come from the flesh and then those that come from the spirit. How do you know when it's a fleshly emotion or when it's a emotion that's like a spiritual emotion that's leading you? How do you know which one's like when the spirit or the flesh are leading you, essentially?
One way, and this is just off the top of my head, but one thing that I think of is, in the Bible, it says be angry and sin not. And I think I've heard lots of different interpretations of that. And I think there's a lot of different things to learn from that verse. But I think one is that you can be angry and not sin. It doesn't mean anger is not necessarily evil. It's the intention behind it. And that's exactly what you're saying. Is it spiritual or is it flesh? And I think one way to know is this causing me to sin? And you know that by what's going on in your heart, and only you can know that. Other people can't see what's going on in your heart. But if an emotion is causing you to be bitter at someone or accuse them of things or be judgmental or to think negatively about yourself or to be fearful or to be stressed out, if it's causing these things that are sin, that are not godly, that are not from God, then I'd say it's probably not something that is meant for you to feel right now. And even if it's like the situation may not be ungodly, but it's kind of like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on in my heart. It's kind of like when you're trying to figure out if you should or shouldn't do something. A lot of times if we're struggling with like religion or fear, we make decisions out of fear, but we are not going to know if we're making the right decision because we're in fear. And fear is not meant to be our guide, right? And so instead of trying to figure out the answer to the decision you're trying to make, you should deal with the fear. Figure out how to get rid of that fear and give it to God and get to a place where you can trust him no matter what. And then think about the decision that you're trying to make and what the best decision is for you, right? And so I think sometimes just realizing like, what are these emotions leading me to do? And if that's something that's not really from God and not something that you should be doing, then I would maybe take a step back and go, okay, what's going on here? Why am I thinking this way, right? Going back to our thoughts, what thoughts am I thinking right now? And start reprogramming like what's going on in your mind right then.
That is so good.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you didn't catch all the episodes, then be sure and watch them in the links below to this whole series on spring cleaning for your soul, mind, will, and emotions. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, then please subscribe and click the notification bell to see all of our future episodes. And we hope you have a wonderful Easter weekend this weekend.
Oh yeah, it's going to be Easter weekend. And also, if you didn't know, make sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And until next week, remember
to have courage
and be kind.